Great. Well, it looks like we have 38 people in this breakout room, which is a really robust group. Very exciting that so many people have come out this evening to share ideas about this project. So maybe we could just do a quick round of introductions for the facilitators, just so everyone knows who's speaking. I'm Gina Worth. I'm the design principal at Scape, and I've worked on a number of projects along the Gowanus Canal. Maybe I'll pass it to Kevin, who spoke earlier.
Kevin Keating, project manager, managing partner here at Seldorf Architects.
Kevin Clark.
Hey folks, Kevin Clark, portfolio manager, New York City DEP, Bureau of Engineering, Design and Construction.
Guy.
Yeah, I'm Guy Dreamer. I'm the design manager for the CSO tank site with Breakout.
And Jen. Jen, you want to say hello? Hey.
Hi, everyone.
Jen holds the very important responsibility of guiding us through our Miro board this evening, which is our interactive engagement platform for tonight. So many thanks to Jen. I think we just wanted to kick off by, again, thanking everyone for joining us this evening and for sharing ideas. As Alicia mentioned and many others mentioned, tonight is really an opportunity for you to share what you would like to see within the site. There's many different edges, there's many different pieces of the site. There's architectural elements, there's landscape elements, there's street elements. So we're excited to hear all of your ideas. Jen has zoomed into the board that is really our interactive board here. So we're going to be going around and answering these different questions that are listed. We have 4 questions for our hour-long session. So I'm going to try and just make sure we cover all the different topics so we can hear a wide range of feedback. You're also welcome to add in other ideas and other thoughts that aren't covered under these questions. We really want to hear from you. Jen, maybe you can zoom over to the left as well. On the left, we have all the reference material that was shared in the presentation. So if you have a question about something that was shared, need clarification, we're happy to kind of go back and answer these as much as we can. We do want to stay focused this evening on the future of this site. And so if you have deeply technical questions, we might find other ways to follow up on those questions about the CSO facility. I wanted to ask before we start, if anyone feels comfortable, please, I think put your introductions back in the chat if you want to share again, just so people understand who is in this particular breakout room. But I think we can get started just looking at the screen. Everyone's able to see the screen, correct? Great. Let's zoom into our first question. Any comments you make are going to be recorded in the Miro board. So if you have a comment about a specific image, or if you have a comment about a particular place on the site, we can mark that up and make post-it notes. So you should see your ideas reflected directly. We're also recording this session. So in case we don't catch anything, we'll be able to get that material later. So let's just kick it off. Our first question here is, what is your vision for the facility buildings? Which examples and ideas resonate with you the most? The images shown here kind of showing different concepts for different facilities: green roofs, transparency, very simple structures, more expressive structures, textured materials. But I think let's hear from you. And if you would like to make a comment, I think what Alicia instructed was to please raise your hand, and we'll be monitoring the chat. Monitoring the hand raising. I see David Briggs.
Yes, how are you?
Hello.
So I have to admit, I'm a little offended that you didn't include Gowanus by Design's vision for the salt lot. You're well aware of it, as are many people on this call. It was done by several architects, and everything that I think should be on the salt lot is in that presentation. And I put a link into the other chat, and I'll put it in this chat.
That's
But
great.
out of respect for your fellow designers, you should include not just your client's vision, but everybody's vision. To be fair, more specifically, I would like the head house facility to reflect the history of the canal and perhaps maybe the silo shapes. I think there ought to be a community center on the site. And I think there should be a composting facility and as much park space as possible with access to the waterway. That's all I'll say for now, because I'll leave room for others.
That's great. Thank you, David.
Yeah, and that's perfect, David. And I apologize for not including the Gowanus by Design vision in the reference images. And there's many resource documents that we can and should be looking at. So I appreciate the reference. Other comments?
I have one, Gina.
Oh, great, Brad. Okay,
Thanks.
thanks for raising your hand in the chat.
Thing. Sorry, I'll do that going forward. Yeah, with respect to the building, I have thoughts on a variety of points about the site, but with respect to the actual facility itself, for me, it's really crucial that the facility actually be distinctive to Gowanus. Like it needs to scream that it is not just anywhere else. And, I think there's creative ways to do that are useful as well and have fun, memorable design elements. So the big thing that comes to mind is incorporating a very large scale tide clock on the building in some fashion that's visible from multiple points on the water and also visible from the 3rd Street Bridge and like the Whole Foods Esplanade and the foot of 2nd Avenue, so that you have this, I'm envisioning like a giant sort of cyan blue indicator that will let people know in the neighborhood, the fact that we live on a tidal estuary and just reinforce that special fact about this neighborhood. So something like that, or even just including the word Gowanus in a very large scale on the facility rather than just having a generic box. Something that really definedly says this is Gowanus, not just some warehouse that could be anywhere.
That's a great point. I see the follow-up comment in the chat of no neon signs, please. So the back and forth is really helpful, I think, with the chat and the feedback here. I think Meredith raised the hand next.
Hi. So I'm an art historian, just to give you a little bit of my agenda or perspective. Some flags are going up for me. I would be worried about some kind of Disney version of something that people have decided is the, icon for Gowanus. The heritage of the architecture is functionality, right? So you don't build something to look like something it's not. You don't want to build something to look like a factory if it's not a factory. That is actually not, that's doing like a Disney version of making something look like Gowanus rather than the actual heritage, which is functional building at its purest, most vernacular, most basic, the kinds of things that architects admire all over the place. I don't need to tell you this, the architects, but just to everyone else, to think about like, I don't think we want to do some kind of like updated, kitschy version of an industrial building, like a Disney Gowanus. That worries me, as does neon. I love the idea of a tidal clock, but could it be, designed like in a really sophisticated way, more like a sundial or something that's physical or something that is like weather vanes? We don't want like some big glowing blinking sign, I don't think. Speaking for the neighbors who look out in that direction and appreciate some of the darkness. Thank you.
That's great input. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that, the purity of the facility itself, showcasing that it really is a machine. There's great sort of architects throughout history, Albert Kahn, and, some could refer to municipal buildings here in the earlier part of the 20th century that we often reference. And I appreciate that input. It's great.
Perfect. I see that Peter has raised his hand. I'd like to speak.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with the don't fake it. There is so much going on already. This is a combined sewage overflow facility. It should fade away, go completely out of sight, be as low, unobtrusive, and honest as possible. If it's got tubes and ventilators, great. Don't make them look fancy. Don't cover them with transparent crap. And make as much space as possible, green roofs, whatever you can do to open up the space, have access to the water wherever it's possible. Let the stuff that grows in a tidal swamp marsh grow, give as much life back to this, what is it, 2 acres? How many acres total are we having on the canal for real in this massive rezoning? Let it be. Follow GCC's lead. Turn as much of it into dirt and keep your hands off of it. Let it do what it wants to do and back off. Let people come into a natural park and look at what would live everywhere if we weren't doing it on concrete instead. Okay, you get the drift. Don't do this stuff. No offense to anyone, but do it on the concrete. This could be something really beautiful and wild, with people hopefully going into a clean canal. And yes, Brad, hopefully being able to easily access it, get back out again quickly, and have fun as if it were nature instead of a city. We got enough city. I'll shut up and put down my hand.
Peter, that's great. And I see some agreement with you in the chat as well here. I think we should move on to Patrick. And Peter, what you mentioned about putting down your hand is very helpful, because then I know if you have a repeat question. So people who have had their question answered and don't want to speak again, please figure out how to take down your hand. Thank you. Patrick? Patrick, are you able to unmute? Patrick, we can't hear you. Maybe you can put your comment in the chat and we can read it out loud. Maybe while you figure that out, we can go on to Paul.
Hi, yes, thank you everyone for doing this. I agree with all the comments. I know that open space access is critical in connecting the canal shoreline and having it safely accessed and used and enjoyed. I just want to point out that this is in the IBZ, and I'm hoping that the planners and the leaders in our community realize that there are critical need issues, functional needs that we have in the IBZ, and that a portion of this site or a portion of the other site are looked at in a way that will help ease some of the clogging on our streets with sanitation equipment. We are a city. We still need places to park and service the trucks that take away our garbage and move it around and keep them out of sight and smell. We have a lot more residential use coming to the area. So if we are planning a area or community that is healthy and safe, I think unfortunately to a lot of people's disapproval, we need to facilitate some facilities for the use of city equipment and infrastructure. And if we don't take advantage of the opportunity that these sites present, we're only going to clog the IBZ with more trucks on our streets and less functionality to getting our city to operate functionally and safely. So I hope that when we look at these areas and we do put open space and green space and we do the composting and the conservancy's great work, that we realize that the city still needs to put their trucks somewhere rather than on our streets. And the IBZ is clogged with sanitation equipment. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Paul. If there's any specific locations you want to follow up on, please put those in the chat. But that kind of consideration of the potential conflicts and managing those between recreation and industry, I think, is very important. We're going to move on to Lisa in a second. I did want to maybe introduce another question too, but we can keep answering this question. We can add more questions, but just so we're kind of thinking a little more broadly than just the architecture, maybe Jen, you can zoom over to question 2. How do we imagine the waterfront experience? What examples and ideas resonate with you most? I've seen a lot of comments already on this in the chat, and these images shown here are just a couple of potential experiences. So it'd be great to hear from all of you, like what are very successful waterfronts in the area? What are very unsuccessful waterfronts that you'd like to speak to? But just kind of opening up the questions a bit, but Lisa, love to hear from you on whichever questions you'd like to answer.
Hi. Well, I am speaking tonight because I have volunteered for the Gowanus Canal Conservancy's plant nursery for the last 4.5 years. And I wanted to support their vision. They have also drawn up an extensive and comprehensive plan for the site that takes into account all of the functions that you've talked about. And I think that they speak with authority because of what they've already done on that site, which is really just short of miraculous. They have made a garden on a site that, I mean, and a garden in the largest sense of the word on a site that was rubble. So I am here to support them and urge you to support them and their ongoing work. We have grown thousands and thousands of plants on this property under very difficult conditions, no greenhouse, no heat, none of the things that most commercial growers have. And we have sent them out into the community. So it's not just the site that benefits. But in terms of this site, aside from expressing my support for the continued home for the Gowanus Canal Conservancy's plant program, schools program, et cetera, I wanted to say that anything green, I support. Green roofs, paths, green shorelines, soft shorelines to mitigate some of the bulkheads that have gone up and cut off wildlife that uses the water from the shore, because a lot of those animals, we would have a lot more biodiversity if there was a way for animals to get from water to shore and back again. And the bulkheads have eliminated that possibility along most of the canal. So I think that we really need to put it in here and wherever we can. I also wanted to say that I think in terms of design, the fewer straight lines, the more meandering paths. I want to point out that your meandering pedestrian path in the slide is a straight path. I really mean meandering and mystery and drama in the design. The last thing I want to say is this area is already underserved for parks. It will be grossly underserved when we have all the new residents here. And I think we really need to make every inch of this as green as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you for your efforts in the nursery operations. I have purchased plants from the nursery before, and they're growing like gangbusters in my garden. And so it is a testament to that work. I think we should try again to call on Patrick. Patrick? Just gonna give it one more second. Patrick, are you able to get the audio working? It doesn't seem like it. So maybe we'll move on to Brad, and I'll try and chat Patrick.
Great, thank you, Gina. I think it's really important, first and foremost, that the existing boat launch or water access point for recreational human-powered boats is retained and upgraded at the foot of 2nd Avenue. And then also that an additional small boat launch is added on the 6th Street turning basin. Because as the neighborhood builds out and there are more and more people, the very few existing access points are not going to be sufficient. So we should plan for that, and we should be planning for a clean canal, given that that process is underway. A few other things I wanted to mention in terms of what makes for a good waterfront experience. Diversity of experiences, and that means not just parks and plants and nature. I am a huge fan of those things, and they should be a top priority at the site. But I think it's important to have at least a few nodes that do other things. So the boat launches, also potentially leaving some of the existing bulkhead or a new bulkhead of the same type along the 6th Street turning basin where vessels, small scale vessels could come in. So that could be an educational vessel, science vessel, a small scale sail freight vessel. There's a whole variety of things, but preserving some ability for this public site to actually have vessels dock would be helpful. In addition to a lot of soft edges and tidal marsh, and GCC has done a great job of starting that on a small scale, and the same with the garden at the end of 2nd Avenue. It's been great because the 2nd Avenue street end provides a space for both water access and the small gardens. But having variety along the edge is key, absolutely.
Great. Jen, do you think you can zoom back out to the map? Because I'm curious, Brad, with some of your comments, are there specific areas where like that harder edge bulkhead might be helpful for boat pull up and specific? Yeah, and I'm curious also about the boat access, like having 2 boat launches on the site, how would you differentiate them?
Yeah, the one at the foot of 2nd Avenue, because you have a public street coming directly to the end, having a boat launch that would be large enough to facilitate a motorized boat going down the ramp in case it's needed for rescue of a person who might fall in from a bridge or from an esplanade or from a boat, or to rescue wildlife. There have definitely been times where the Gowanus dredgers have had to go out in canoes to observe imperiled marine life. So having an improved ability there with a larger ramp would make sense. And then inside the 6th Street turning basin, because I know there's desire to recreate tidal marsh in that basin, in some portions of it, having a smaller scale access point that's more centered on human powered boats, so kayaks, canoes, rowboats, stand-up paddleboards, and the like would make sense. And then in terms of where some remnant of bulkhead could be, that could either be somewhere sort of midway down the 6th Street turning basin, or if, as the bulkhead is rebuilt, potentially, I guess you could say just to the west of where the new outfall is going to be, so that that basically a ship or a vessel would be docking in the main channel. So there's a chance of likely a better channel for it to operate in. And also it would then be a sort of a public plaza there at the street end, at the end of 2nd Avenue, that would spill over in front of the CSO facility and allow for egress.
Okay, I think that specificity is really helpful for our process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move on to Richard, Patrick was able to put his comments in the chat. So I was just going to read them because he's having some audio issues. So he says, does not want to use the space for parking. We need as much green space as possible. The area has hardly any green spaces, so the greener the better. Absolute must is a boat launch. We need to be able to utilize the water space rather than just look at it. Without a boat launch, the canal is really just dead space. So I think that reinforces a lot of what Brad was saying as well. Should we move on to Richard? His hands up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to chat with you. When I think about this site, I think about the context in which it finds itself and from which it has come. And it's going to be finding itself in a rezoning. And one can only imagine that developers in a rezoning are going to duplicate Lightstone many times over. And I think the problem with that is that Gowanus has a huge footprint in terms of its history that, you know, goes back to the Dutch, has significance in our first founding of this country, in the development of New York City, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is an opportunity I think you have to somehow figure out within the concept that you're trying to create how to get a sense of history built in so that people are reminded of the community that they're living in and its roots. And I think it's an opportunity for all the things that people have been talking about relative to green space and minimalism on the buildings, et cetera. But I think beyond that, I think there needs to be incorporated within that design, and whether that's standalone elements or whether that's part of the buildings, signage or nomenclature or whatever built into the buildings, a reflection of its rich past, because that increasingly, as you look around at Gowanus, is being lost. And I think this is an opportunity to actually make sure that it doesn't get lost. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Richard. I think interpretation is really critical, and it's hard to imagine an area that has more rich layers of history than the Gowanus, as it's changed so much and transformed completely. I believe Katya had a comment. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Katya.
You did, yes. Hi, my name is Katya Kelly, a member of Friends, Residents of Greater Gowanus, a voice of Gowanus, and have been serving on the EPA Community Advisory Group for the last 12 years. I have a more technical question here, which is the city had invited the community to dream, like we are dreaming tonight, about the space at the top of the canal where the larger tank is going to be. And we made a lot of the same comments we're making tonight. I think the vision was very much what people are envisioning here tonight. And what we got is not at all what we wanted. What guarantee can you give us tonight that all of the people who came out here tonight to really envision this with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of, really dreaming for the future of the site, are we ever going to get any of those things, or is this going to end up looking exactly like the other facility at the head of the canal, which is just basically benches with a couple of meandering paths, but none of the things that we wanted?
Yeah, I appreciate that question a lot. The design team hasn't designed this site, so we're here like as a open book and an open canvas, hearing your ideas. I can't speak on the process for the last project, but there are some team members here. I will say that this site, I think, holds incredible opportunity because some of its wide edges and canal frontage. It has quite a lot of canal frontage on this site. It has partner organizations using the site that already have a public presence. And I think the full team is committed to kind of creating a public amenity and asset on the site, in addition to meeting all of the infrastructure needs, which are great. And so I don't know if Kevin Clark wants to add anything from this from the perspective of DEP, but from the perspective of the design team, we are here and we are going to be testing how to incorporate these ideas on the site and figure out what makes the most sense for the client and for the community.
Yeah, I would certainly want to echo a lot of what Gina said. At the head end site, there were a lot more constraints. All of the public space that we provided there was above the CSO tank that we're going to be providing there. In addition, we were constrained by the bulkhead and groundwater cutoff wall that National Grid had to construct as part of the Fulton record of decision. Here, there is a lot more opportunity to do some different things. We can play with the turning basin. We've got a lot more waterfront to play with, and there's more open space to play with that would not be constrained by infrastructure below it. So, we're here, just like you are, nobody really wants to waste, their time on a Thursday evening. We're here, we're taking it seriously. Everything in yellow is basically, up for grabs. So we're here to chat about it. And we welcome your input and thank you for participating.
Thanks, Kevin. Meredith, did you have an additional comment?
I did. I'm just
Great.
wondering if, speaking about diversity and access and the plants and also, access for, waterfowl and other species. I'm looking at the image of the site. It just strikes me that the turning basin and the other shoreline could potentially be quite differentiated in terms of the treatment, in terms of character. And that's just something that it seems like is a real opportunity because they're so opposite from one another spatially, but there's room for two really different kinds of treatments. That's all.
Yeah, Meredith, I think that's a really important point too, because they'll also have different levels of water traffic within them. I assume they will have different depths. I can't speak to that specifically this evening, but they have different depths today. And just the way water flows through them is quite different. So there's, I think, quite a lot of potential and thinking about, we've heard a lot tonight about magnifying difference within the site. So I think that's a great observation. Let's go to David, who's next, and then we're going to transition to the next question, which I think a lot of people have already started to answer in the chat too.
I just have a couple of questions regarding just clarification what's on the plan and something Kevin just said. First of all, what are the partner organization facilities listed next to DSNY? And second, Kevin, when you said everything in yellow is up for grabs, I guess I'm a little confused only because of what happened at the north site where we have a park over the tanks, and it seems like some of the gray to the left of the CSO facility are the tanks, if I understand the diagrams correctly. And is there any reason why that's can't be discussed as well, or and since that's gray and the DSNY and partner organization facilities are gray, I'm not sure if some is just sort of hardscaping and some are buildings. I just would like some clarification on what these program elements are.
Sure. So I'll start with the first question. So the DSNY, we need to relocate all the existing uses from the existing salt lot site, right? So that includes the Department of Sanitation, salt storage shed, the plow storage, the brining operation, the composting operation. We say partner organizations because even though DSNY constructed the composting, they do have an operator there, and that's big reuse. And I believe, GCC is also working with big reuse on that. And then GCC is basically, made use of all all of the additional unused space on that site. And so we're looking to, accommodate those uses south of the existing Fifth Street. And, we don't have a design for that yet, but, we're blocking out that space for that. And on your second comment regarding the space above the CSO tank, we're proceeding with the design of the CSO tank right now. I think it's going to be a little bit harder here just because of the configuration of the tank. It's a very irregular shape and that sort of thing. And, we can get into some more detail about that at another meeting, but I don't think it's going to be as easy to accommodate access on top of the tank here as it was there. But,
Can I ask a
we
quick
might be able
follow-up?
to continue we might be able to continue to have that conversation. Yes, of course.
Okay. Is the access drive an FDNY thing?
No, there's maintenance that's required in the tanks. So occasionally we've got to get equipment and men inside the tank. You might recall we were talking about having Vector trucks and large ventilation units placed over the top of the tank to allow for the men to get into the tank. It's that sort of thing. So there'll be like hatches basically, in the slab at grade.
Sure. No, I understand. And I'm just going to throw this out there because I know you and I talked about it once. There's no way you can rotate the tanks, because if you could rotate them and they're parallel to Second Avenue, then the access could happen from Second Avenue. You'd free up a lot of space on the site. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, it's probably it's a little late for that, I think, for a change that's significant.
Well, you knew about it 2 years ago, Kevin. I mean, come on, 3 years ago. I mean, to be fair, we talked about it.
Okay,
I'm
I
not
don't
gonna get
recall
into
that,
it.
but
I have an email exchange. I can send it to you if you want. But I mean,
Okay.
I mean that would
Please do.
rotating it would get rid of the access drive.
You talking about Fifth Street?
Say that again.
Are you talking about Fifth Street?
I'm
Like
talking about
the
Second Avenue.
access in the middle? Dave,
Oh,
why
well,
don't we
that's
take this
Fifth Street,
offline?
yes.
Because why don't we take this
Sure.
offline? Because this is,
Sure.
it's quite distracting at this point. Thank you.
I think it's a good opportunity too to move to the third question, just to make sure we're covering some of the information that would be really helpful for the design team. I saw a lot of comments in the chat about programming in terms of environmental education, in terms of more playful spaces or diversity of spaces. We have images here showing, different methods for incorporating green infrastructure and rain gardens into these types of projects, spaces that could accommodate like very large groups, like in an open lawn or a stepped theater setting, spaces that could have more like recreational nature, whether that be small group, large group recreation or more one-on-one like ping pong scale recreation. I'm just curious what people think about any of these ideas, or what programming and amenity programs you'd love to see for the community here that haven't already been mentioned. And Meredith, you have your hand raised.
Sorry, I think my hand was raised from before. I do like the idea, though. I think that depending on residences nearby, someplace that like some kind of like natural amphitheater, or someplace that could be used for, community-based performances or music or small, like, permitted stuff like that would be something we don't have.
That's great. I'm also seeing comments in the chat that relate to this around public artwork, like a focal public sculptural work, something that could be locally manufactured. If anyone wants to elaborate on any of those ideas, we could certainly talk more about that. Oh, Brad, I see your hand up.
Thanks. Yes, no, since this slide shows water access, I will just state again for the record that I definitely support water access at this site. But you mentioned locally produced art. So I did want to point out that because Gowanus is a place of manufacturing, that to the extent that we can incorporate design elements that are produced locally that actually have a story to tell about the fact that, say, they were built at Sarrett Metalworks just a few blocks down the canal. That helps make this a distinctive place without totally Disneyfying it. So that's something to consider. And also thinking about how are we getting these materials that we're using on the site to build out the design elements? Are we finding creative ways to transport them that aren't using massive amounts of carbon? If so, let's explore those possibilities and make this a model project.
That's very important, Brad. Thank you. I also see your comments earlier in the chat about maybe it's not a conventional program, but the idea of feral pockets or spaces that are left for wildlife to enjoy that aren't disturbed by people or dogs. And so we could think about adding that to our program list as well.
Thanks so much.
Other comments from the 35 people on the call tonight? I see in the chat comments about outdoor classrooms for students of all ages, stewardship and education center, intertidal marshes. I think we've talked a lot about already. I'm curious if anyone has specific locations in the plan where they think some of these elements might be best applied or kind of work best with some of the site characteristics, right? We have these very different edges of the project. There's a big peninsula that has a lot of area for potential public access. We also have some maybe more esplanade or connective landscapes that can stitch between 2nd Avenue and the end of the peninsula, and also back to the end of the 6th Street turning basin. So I'd love to hear any of those thoughts also applied spatially. Brad, do you want to go again, or is your hand just still up?
Well, one thing I did want to mention is we have not actually discussed bridges in this group. And I know that there are a number of the community plans that speculate on bridges being here in 2 different places. One at the tip of the peninsula, crossing the main channel to the public place site. And I just wanted to point out that if a bridge is built there, it really does need to be capable of opening to permit vessels to transit and to retain full navigability of the canal. And for one reason, at least, that is crucial for the Gowanus, because if additional dredging is ever needed or work to maintain the Superfund remedy, we absolutely need to be able to get equipment all the way up the canal to do that work. And I'm saying that because some of you know this who are deeply involved in this stuff, but the EPA is dredging out a lot of the polluted material down at the bottom of the canal. But in many places, it is actually not removing it. It is doing what's called in situ stabilization. So, and they're capping over some of the native sediment that will still have pollution in it. So we are going to have to, as a community, remain really vigilant about the status of the canal over time. And so we have to make sure that the main channel, and really arguably any of the arms of the canal too, have full navigability so that vessels that would be needed to do that work can access the site.
That's a great point. I think Rich has a comment. Rich, are you able to unmute?
Yeah, sorry about that. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
So I'm in a cafe. Good. Yeah, I'm in a cafe, so I'm filling up the comment board. But I wanted to hop on just to mention that idea and reinforce the idea that people are already talking about, that artwork, local unique artwork, could go a really long way in creating a unique space that people would be able to interact with, that people would want to come and use. And I had this idea of a fountain to connect the water, to physically connect the water and the community, and the idea of purifying water. So something like where people can come, and it would be, I used to work at Lefferts House in Prospect Park, and there was a little pump, and kids loved it. Old Dutch kind of hand pump, but something like that where it would purify water and dump it into the canal. There's a million kind of ways you can do that in a more modern way or more traditional way, or both, that would connect the history. So, and then mural walls. I mean, there's so many ways that public art could enliven the space without being obtrusive. So I just wanted to put that out there. Instead of architecturally doing it, maybe the art is doing that, and maybe it's programmed also.
Rich, thank you. Yeah, I like the distinction between maybe some of the different character the architecture can take on versus the art maybe being a little bit more able to be free and expressive, and not so confined to expressing the function of the CSO facility.
It's the design is kind of subtle.
There's, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. You can go to someone else. I would go on further.
No, it's great. It's great. I was just going to call attention to some of the comments in the chat. You know, there's an interesting debate going on about lawn versus no lawn on this site. So I'm curious if anyone wants to chime in there. I think there are comments about making sure that we're replacing some of the functions that are being lost when the GCC was in the old location, like outdoor classroom spaces. There are also some comments about the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant and the nature walk there, but also combining that kind of quality of space with the reintroduction of displaced small businesses could be a great opportunity for engaging maker spaces or student workshops or boat repair. So that's interesting. I think that's a programmatic idea we haven't heard yet, like kind of spaces for small business. So really appreciate that. Meredith has a hand raised.
Hi, so I'm sorry if this is something that everybody else knows, and I'm willing to sound like a dummy, but could you just give me a brief sense of, you know, I'm looking at a plan here that has these gray, you know, shapes that are going to be the facility. What are we talking about? Are we talking about, I mean, I sort of imagined it was going underground. Are they 5-story buildings? Are they 1-story build? What is happening? What is the size of those things?
So that's being worked on with the engineers right now. A goal of ours, like it was at the Hedden site, was to reduce the scale of the overall facility as much as we can. There are different volumetric areas. Some are primary spaces like large screens, which remove physical debris, which are the tallest elements in the facility. But there are many areas where we could bring down the overall volumes by setting up secondary, tertiary elements. So the exact shape and configuration have not been sort of designed yet. We're working consistently with the engineering team. But what I do want to point out is this light gray area is the tank itself. Below grade, the darker shade is an approximation of what that facility footprint might look like.
Like the charcoal
that is evolving
dark,
as we speak.
Not, and the lightest gray is roadway, right?
The lightest grade, yes, is roadway, where it says Access Drive and Second Avenue.
So the medium gray is at grade, and the darkest is a building that's above, that's a tall building.
That's right. That's right.
And ballpark.
That's the head house.
Spitballing, is it 2 stories high? Is it 9 stories high? What is it?
No, it might range from 2 to 4 stories. Depending again.
Got it.
Oh, sorry, just
you're in.
maybe Jen can go over to a little diagram on the other slide too, to help illustrate what you're saying, Kevin.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was in the presentation.
And we're running out of time, just to give you a heads up. We might just all of a sudden.
Yes, I'm sorry. I remember that slide. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Kevin. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I think that slide illustrates the components we need and the reduction in scale where we can bring those volumes down.
Yeah, so that lower surface is that light gray area, correct? And then the darker surface is the higher one.
And is
That's
that area fenced off, or can you like walk over it and you have no experience of there being tanks underneath?
Like Kevin alluded to, I mean, in the Red Hook site on the north end of the canal, we were able to provide areas of access for the public over the tank. It was definitely much more complex. So there may be opportunities where we could do that on the western edge of this. We have to work with the engineers to provide the access down to the tanks, as he was mentioning, so that there's a little give and take. But we are trying to provide as much publicly accessible open space as possible, even if that means providing even a little more additional space over the tanks, if we can accommodate that.
Thank you very much.
And I think in a minute we might get whisked away, but until then, Peter, did you want to make a comment?
Just a quick nuts and bolts question about the end of 2nd Avenue there. It's been catching a lot of flack. Is it, I know right now it's almost always parked up with, I assume they're cars for the correctional facility. I don't know, but is there some way to manage traffic so you can still turn around at the end of the street, but not take it right to the water's edge like that? It's a dead end anyway, and you've got the head house right there. Is it possible to turn around in front of the head house instead of past it? If it's possible and you don't want to, I just want to know if it's possible.
No, we're with you on that viewpoint. Ideally, we'd like to pull that back from the water's edge and try to make sure that we're basically overlapping vehicular need into the facility with any turning radiuses that we need for FDMY or access. So this is only extremely diagrammatic, extremely elementary, but we are trying to, I think, basically achieve what you're pointing out here, Peter.
Excellent, thank you.
I'm just going to chime in here. We're going to close the rooms and go back to the main room. Just give me 1 second.
Great. If you're not brought back to the main room, you can click the blue Leave Room button on the bottom right, and it should take you back to the main room. So I'm going to do that now. Thank you so much for